Welcome. I am so glad that you are tuning in today. My name is Amy McInnes. I am a mother of 5, entrepreneur, an owner of multiple businesses, a couples counselor, and a woman who understands how to build personal capacity. That's what we're talking about today in this episode of The Art of Plenty. We are diving into what it means to have capacity and what my tips and tricks are that you can utilize so that you can increase capacity in your own life. But before we get into those tips and tricks, I got to tell you something. I fell on my road bike yesterday. And I'm okay. Clearly, I am okay. If you're watching this on YouTube, you can see that I don't have any marks or bruises on my face. So I am certainly okay. But the side of my hip is hurting. It didn't hurt yesterday, but it's hurting today. And I want to tell you this story. But before I tell you about my crash, I got to preface this by saying to you that riding a bike has never really been something that I did naturally. My dad tried to teach me when I was maybe 5 years old, which at that time was the standard time for learning how to ride a bike because we didn't have run bikes. I mean, I honestly think that those are key for helping kids learn how to ride faster. So kindergarten comes along. My older brother, he learned to ride very well and was riding his bike across town to school by grade 1. So of course I should be able to learn how to ride a bike when I was 5, but I could not. And my dad would try to teach me. And every year I couldn't do it. I was scared of getting hurt. And so it wasn't until I was either 7 or 8 years old when I actually learned. And the way I learned was riding around in my basement. At that time, the basement in our house was unfinished. So it was just concrete and an open area. And it was the middle of winter and I learned how to ride my bike on my own. I learned when there wasn't the pressure of performing and there wasn't the fear of hurting myself. I could take my own time. So I did not start life out being a good bike rider. And last fall, I was talking with my brother who had ran a triathlon earlier in the season. And we were talking about it. And I was thinking, oh, yeah, this sounds kind of interesting. So he said, if you were going to do the triathlon, you're going to need a bike, a road bike, because he had rode the triathlon portion of his race on his mountain bike. And he said it was disastrous. It was so hard. It was so heavy. He said, if you're going to do this, just go online and find an old used road bike. So I had not committed to the idea of a triathlon at this time. And if you've listened to my episode on the downside of goal setting on Spotify or Apple Podcasts, you will know that I've been training for a triathlon, and you'll know the reason why I am training for a triathlon. But at this stage, that isn't what I was thinking about. It was more so just this idea that was just starting to percolate in my mind. So I go online after this conversation, and there's a road bike. It's a triathlon road bike. It's not very expensive, and it's my size, and it's in town. So I make arrangements to meet the owner. I end up purchasing the bike. Enter winter and fall. My birthday, I'm a fall baby. So my husband buys me a kicker, which is an apparatus that I can take the back wheel off my bike and just practice riding on my bike. So then at Christmas time, he buys me clipless shoes. So now I'm kind of set up come January. I am riding indoors through the winter training, and I'm riding my road bike in town. Now, when I purchased my clipless shoes, which was my Christmas gift, there's this fabulous woman at the sports store in town. Her name's Haley. I love her. She's at Jarek's, and every time I go in there, she just makes me feel good about things, and she never makes me feel embarrassed about things that I don't know about, because I definitely do not know anything about gear. And she's so helpful. So she says to me, when you're going to start riding with your clipless shoes, make sure you practice in a doorway. Don't just start in the middle of the road or on the trail. So I thought, oh, okay. But I wasn't really thinking about it because I knew I was going to be riding on my kicker. for the next few months because it's winter, right? And there is snow, and there's no way I'm riding a road bike outside in winter. So winter comes and goes, and now it is spring. And yesterday was my first day riding my bike outside on an actual road. And prior to this, I was thinking, okay, I probably need to practice because I was remembering what Haley had told me about starting in a doorway. So I read a couple things online that recommended starting on lawn because when you fall, you're going to hit the grass. So in my mind, I'm thinking when I fall, I didn't even think that was going to be a factor. I have no interest in falling. I do not like physical pain. So I thought, okay, I'm going to try practicing on the lawn. So I clip in on the lawn, I'm riding around, I clip out, easy peasy, I think. So I'm like, okay, I'm ready for the road. So yesterday I head out to the trail system. We have this trail that runs parallel to the highway. Fabulous place to start road biking, right? Because there isn't the element of traffic, which kind of stresses me out a bit because, again, not really comfortable on a bike and total newbie to road riding. So I'm clipped in and I am riding. And there are points when people turn off the highway and cross this trail system. So when you come up to a point where the road is crossing, there's a big stop sign and there's these gates that you kind of weave through to slow you down. So then you can look for traffic, keep going, and then you weave through more gates on the other side to keep going. So I have navigated this for the majority of my ride. I've gone through several crossings. I'm getting used to being on the bike. I'm getting used to clipping in and leaning down, and I'm getting momentum and feeling more and more comfortable on the bike. Even though it's windy and I'm still out of my element, I'm starting to feel like, okay, I can do this. I know what to do. I come up to the last gate of my ride. And coming from the other direction are two other cyclists, and they're pedaling. And I'm like, okay, who's going first through the gate system? Because the timing's a little bit off. So they are through the other gate system before I'm through my gate system, but we're going to meet around the first gate. And they're waving me through. So I'm pedaling super slow, which again, on a bike, going slow is often more difficult to keep your balance. And as I weave through the gate, they're now off to the side. A car is coming off the highway and coming across the road system. So I know that I need to stop so I don't run into the car. And I don't have a lot of space because there's the two cyclists on the side and there's the gate beside me. And I can't get my feet out of the clips. Too many things happening at once, and I go down. I land in the gravel. I have now scratched my bike that was in mint condition for the last 15 years that the previous cyclist owned it for. There wasn't a mark on it, and I've totally marked it up. My shoes are scuffed. My hip is sore. I did not have the capacity I needed in order to navigate all three of those elements: the gate, the additional cyclists, and the car. Now, if it had just been the gate, I would have had capacity. If it had just been the cyclists, I would have had capacity. If it had just been the car turning off the road, I would have had capacity. Or even a combination of two of those things. But I certainly did not have the capacity to manage all of those things at once while wearing clipless shoes. I full on went down. And I'm telling you, my heart rate, my adrenaline, that was the biggest spike in my whole ride, was when I fell and had to get up and then walk across the road because I wasn't getting back on my bike because I thought, what if I can't even ride? So I'm like, I just have to walk. I have to walk for a few minutes so that I can reduce my heart rate so that I know that when I get back on the bike, I can actually pedal enough that I can get both of my feet clipped in and finish my ride. Capacity matters because we're going to come up into situations in life that we have not fully prepared for. And we have to have capacity to navigate those situations so that we don't end up in situations where we get hurt, whether it's physical or whether it's emotional, or whether it's relational, or whether there are consequences to our life circumstance, like our work or our jobs or our relationships. Increasing your capacity means that you are better able to manage the things that are coming at you in a way that you can continue moving forward in the direction that you're wanting to go. You see, capacity happens on different levels. We have mental capacity, so we're talking about brain space and intellect. We have capacity for learning, for understanding. We have physical capacity, which means our ability to do things physically. So whether that is preparing for a triathlon, or going for a run, or lifting weights, or even just living our day-to-day life without the physical elements, we have a physical capacity. What our bodies are able to handle, what our mind is able to handle, is our mental capacity. We have emotional capacity. So how much emotion we can take, not just our own emotions that we're experiencing, but also the emotions of the people that we are in relationship with. And then we have relational capacity, and that is our ability and to be in relationship with other people and to support people and also to be supported. So there are different types of capacity, and they don't happen in isolation from one another. For example, when you have an athlete, they just don't have only physical capacity, they also have mental capacity that goes with that. And the greater or the more difficult level of that they are competing at, so the higher the stakes, the more competitive the realm that they are competing in, the greater that pressure, not just physical, but also mental. The person that is training for a gold medal experiences that pressure very differently than a kid that's running a race at a local track meet. You see, the pressure is much greater. But also, if a person is at that level where they're training for something like the Olympics, they have increased their capacity to an incredible amount. We don't just have one aspect of capacity that we need to utilize for different situations. We have many aspects of that. So we have to find ways in order to build up our mental capacity, our emotional capacity, our physical capacity in order to have growth. And that's what the Art of Plenty podcast is really about. We really are about talking about ways to grow, ways to move into the life that you were destined for. And in order to do that, in order to be who you were meant to be, you're going to have to be able to increase your capacity. You're going to have to find ways to increase not just your mental capacity, but your emotional capacity, your physical capacity, your relational capacity, because all of these elements are a part of what makes life so rich. And to have the life that you were meant for, we need all of these components. We need the mental challenges, we need the physical health and the physical challenges, we need the rewarding relationships, and we need the personal aspect where we feel fulfilled. So the things that we are personally interested in. So when we talk about living the life we were meant for, we're talking about all of these different areas. And in order to have that, we have to build capacity in all of these areas. I remember when I was a kid in elementary school, I think this was the first time that I heard about this. They were talking about the brain, and they said that there's so much of the brain that we don't use. And I can't remember what the numbers were because this is a long time ago that I was in elementary school. But I have thought about that on many different occasions. And I don't know the biological component of this. But the feeling that I got when they shared this information was that we have untapped potential. that there is so much more opportunity for more. And that's what capacity is about. It's about starting to stretch things out so that we can have even greater potential fulfilled in our life. In order to be successful, we have to have ways to increase our capacity. Now, there is a reason why those 180-degree turns don't necessarily work when we're trying to change our life. There's a reason why a lot of New Year's resolutions don't have lasting power. And it's because if we are doing a radical change where we are like a 180 turn, where we're heading in one way and we've decided, nope, we're not doing that way. We're going to go completely the other way and come up with these ostentatious, lofty goals, we can often fail. And the reason for that is, or could be in part, is that we don't have enough capacity for that great of a change, for that great of a shift. So there's ways that we can go about increasing our capacity so that over time we can have significant change that does look like a full 180 turn. It just doesn't start out that way. It starts incrementally. I don't know if you guys are familiar with who Nikola Tesla is. And yes, if you're thinking Tesla as in the vehicle, yeah, that's where the name for the Tesla cars came from, was this physicist, Nikola Tesla. And I heard this story about him the other day. He was a genius who was considered mad in his time, which, I mean, that's not that far out of there. A lot of people that have unusual, exciting ideas are not typically received well in their generation or from their peers. He's the guy that came up with alternating current electricity. And I'm saying that, but I gotta be honest, I don't even know what that means. When I was in school, physics was my worst subject, and it still is not something that my brain understands easily. And I've put no energy into increasing my capacity to understand physics. So for those of you who understand what that means, excellent news. And for those that you who are like me and don't know what that means, he had something to do with how electric cars work. This came out of his ideas. At least that's as far as I understand it. So back to Tesla. This guy, one of the reasons why he was able to do so many incredible things is because he cut down on his sleep. That was a way that he increased his capacity, which is bananas when we know that the advantage of what sleep does for increasing our capacity in other areas. But he would fall asleep holding weights in his hands, because when he would start to fall asleep, the weights would drop and it would wake him up. And in that moment between wake and sleep was when he would have creative ideas. And that's amazing. He was tapping into his potential and his capacity to create an event by activating his brain in that state when it's in between sleep and wake, which I totally get. So even though I don't have a physics brain, I know that for myself, I often get epiphanies in those moments before I'm fully awake. That is often when I get a breakthrough or when I have an idea of how I'm going to approach something with a couple that I'm seeing in counseling. It's when I get insight into something in my own life. And if I don't write it down, when I fully wake up, I will lose it. So I try to train myself that in those moments when I'm kind of just waking up, to make sure that I'm repeating the information that I'm hearing or jot it down as quick as I can so I don't lose it. Back to Nikola Tesla. He knew that that was a way that he could increase his capacity. If he could decrease his sleep but also if he could access that fluid part of his brain that was happening kind of between wake and sleep, then he would have more ingenious ideas. And it totally worked for him. Not the thing that I'm recommending. Reducing your sleep is not one of the tricks or tips that I have for you today for increasing capacity. But here's my first tip. And if you've listened to me at all, whether it's on Apple Podcast or on Spotify, or if you've been watching me on YouTube, you know that one of my big things is mindset. And if you are watching on YouTube, there are notes there for you that are going to come up as slides so that you can remember these tips and tricks. It's easier to write them down if you read. At least that's the case for some people. Some people retain things just from auditory. But for myself, if I write it down, it locks it in for me. So I spend a lot of time talking about mindset, and capacity building is no different. If you want to increase your capacity in any area, you have to tune into what you are telling yourself about your capacity. Are you saying things like, oh, this is so hard. Oh, this is going to be too difficult for me. I don't know how I'm going to do it. You see, those thoughts on their own maybe don't have a lot of power. But over time, they trickle in and they impact how much you're willing to sacrifice and how much you're willing to push and move into an area. You're handcuffing yourself with your thoughts. That will hinder your ability to build capacity. If you don't think you can do it, you won't try in the same way that you will try if you think you can do it. You see, the battle for capacity, the battle for many victories in personal development happens in the mind. It happens in that place between your ears where you are thinking thoughts that will accelerate you and move you in the direction, or will hold you back and pull you down. There was a study done, and I read this in this book. What's the author's name? I can't remember. Maybe I'll put the link in the show notes when I find it. But he was writing about the placebo effect. And there were a bunch of women that they were studying that were cleaning hotels. And they had two groups of women that were working in different hotels. So they did not know about each other in relation to the study. One group of women were told nothing. They were just a part of a study that they were looking at physical fitness. That was the only information they received. They took their some ratings on what their physical abilities were, and then they went about their regular job of cleaning the hotel rooms. Now, the other group of women, they were told that the work that they do as, what do they call them, chambermaids, the people that clean hotels, which, can I just say, I am so thankful for the people that clean hotel rooms. It is such a gift to have your bed made and things tidied up and fresh towels. I'm so thankful for you, whoever you are. Thank you for doing that. It means something to me, and I appreciate it. So the other group of women were told that when they're cleaning hotel rooms, it's like they're exercising, that they are doing a workout. So they took the same measurements of physical health between these two groups of women. And here's what they found. The women who were told that their job is like a workout lost weight over the course of the study. They did not do any other changes. The only change was that they thought about their work in a way that this is exercise, compared to the other group that didn't think about work in that way at all. And there was significant change to their physical well-being. And get this, it's not like these were new people to the job. They had been cleaning prior to this, And it was after that realization that they lost weight and had better physical wellness based on how they were measuring it in the study. Is that not bananas? Does that not reveal to you the impact that your mindset can have on your success, on your ability to build capacity? We got to watch how we talk to ourselves. We got to tune in to the things that we're saying to ourselves, because if you are saying negative thoughts, you are limiting your ability to build capacity, amongst other things. So my first tip, my first trick to building capacity is watch what you think. And don't let yourself think thoughts that are going to be detrimental to your ability to build capacity. Do not go there. Do not ride your bike thinking you're going to bail or you're going to crash. Ride your bike thinking, I've got this. I can do this. I have skills. Because you know what happened to me when I fell on my bike? I built capacity in that moment. I built capacity because I no longer was scared of falling, because I fell and I was fine. It helped to shift my mindset about it. I also realized that I can do this. I wasn't able to navigate all those things, so I knew where my limits were. And today, when I was riding today, I was coming up to the same gate. And there was the gate, there was a rollerblader. Yeah, people still rollerblade. Amazing. And there was a vehicle that was coming down. So I knew that I was the same situation that I was in yesterday was starting to stir, and I could see it. And I made that decision that it's going to be easier for me if I get off my bike now and walk across. So that's what I did. Now, even that experience of realizing that I can stop in that situation when there's people around, when there's a car coming, when I'm navigating the gates, and I can unclip, get across the road, that increases my capacity, because the next time that I go there, I may not need to do that. I would not have unclipped today if I hadn't fallen yesterday. You see that even that experience of going through that, which I wasn't in control of, and I wasn't creating that experience for myself, but even knowing that is a way that has increased my capacity. I know what that experience is like, and now I'm better able to manage those types of situations when I'm in them. So number one tip or trick for building capacity is around your mindset. The next piece is to think about what are the incremental steps that you could take to build your capacity. I touched on this briefly in relation to that big 180 turn, in relation to having New Year's resolutions that are way too large to actually stick with or accomplish. It comes back to this concept of small things often. It's this idea that if we do small steps, have success in that step, and then add another step, our capacity increases at a rate that we're able to maintain it. This is why when you go on Google and you search things like how to train for a triathlon, how to prepare for a marathon, a whole bunch of training plans will come up, even for 5K or 10K. And it'll say things like, from the couch to 5K in 10 weeks, train for a marathon or a year. There's all these different plans because there's different ways to get there. And some have more steps, have more time, and some have less. And this has to do with the capacity that you have when you're going into it. If you're a person who's never ran before, you're not going to choose the same type of plan as someone who runs all the time or has ran for years. Because people come into situations with different levels of capacity, they will require different types of steps in order to build capacity for the thing that they are building, whether it's a triathlon or a run or a committed relationship. We have different levels of capacity. So if we can break down what the steps are to make it incremental and build capacity for that level, then we can build capacity for the next level. I was doing this through the winter. Every time I clipped into my bike, even though my bike only had one wheel because I was in my kicker, getting that motion of clipping in, cycling, and unclipping was building capacity for me. That's why I didn't fall the first time I went on the grass, because I had practiced and I had built capacity for clipping in and out of my shoes. I navigated the gate successfully because there was no other things going on the first time I went through the gate. So I was incrementally building my capacity. The too many things that led to the crash, those aren't always in our control. And that brings me to my next tip or trick for building capacity. Because sometimes we just need to cut ourselves some slack. You see, this process of building capacity, it's not always going to be this nice, pleasant journey where we just keep getting better and better. There are always ups and downs. And that's not just true for building capacity, it's for anything related to personal development. You see, building capacity is putting yourself into a situation of stress or strain. You don't build capacity without that. You're changing the situation of pressure that is around you. You're putting yourself into a situation where you're experiencing some of that stress. And in order to come out successfully, sometimes we need to take breaks because it is stressful. So this is my third tip, and that is just give yourself some slack. There are days where when you are growing and you are doing things and being intentional about that, you might need a break, and that's okay. If you are a person who, like me, typically is very motivated and is eager to do a lot of things, and there are days where you just feel like you can't do it, it's okay. It doesn't mean that you're not increasing your capacity, because we have to balance that push with rest. And when we push too much and we don't have enough rest, sometimes it can be hard. So that's a way of keeping it incremental also, is by making sure that we're taking care of ourselves in the process. Because building capacity is putting your body in some type of strain. Here's my next tip. Do you know what your default emotion is when you get into situations of stress? Here comes the tip part. If you know what your default emotion is, then you are more able to guard against it as you increase capacity. So let me talk about what a default emotion is. When people get into situations of stress or strain, which capacity building will do, because you're putting yourself into that situation intentionally in order to grow and improve, regardless of whether it's in a capacity situation or another situation where you're just experiencing stress or strain, there's a default emotion that you will likely go to. For some people, it's anger. What does this look like? This looks like when you're in a new fitness regime, you're just irritable. You're just annoyed or frustrated. And the default emotion is kind of a little bit of anger. And what you will notice with people that have this default emotion, when they get stressed, they take their anger out on situations that are not related at all on what is going on. Other people will have a default emotion of anxiety. So this could look like the person is experiencing stress or strain, and the automatic response is an anxious response, which can play out in different ways. They might pull back, they might withdraw from conversations, they might get irritable, because oftentimes if people are feeling anxious, it'll come out as irritability to others. They might not have a lot of tolerance for new things, or I know for myself, if I'm feeling anxious, I don't have a lot of tolerance for trying new foods. Maybe that sounds bizarre, but I just want to eat comfort foods that don't have a lot of flavor when I'm feeling more anxious. The reason why I bring up knowing what your default emotion is it becomes a clue for if you are putting too much pressure and you haven't quite matched the capacity for that pressure yet. So as that emotion builds in you, whether it's anxiety or anger or another emotion, it can help you curb how much pressure you're putting on yourself when you're in a situation where you're trying to increase capacity. The other piece is knowing that that's what's going on can give you a sense of control over it, and you can help to tweak it. So for example, if you're a person whose default emotion is anger and you're feeling frustrated at your kids because they're throwing their socks on the floor and they never pick up their socks, where do all the socks come from? There are socks all over our house. And you're feeling irritable about it. When you clue in that, oh, this is because I'm working really hard on this project at work because I'm increasing my capacity at work so that I can do more tasks. I'm not really that annoyed about the socks. Yeah, I don't really like them there, but I don't need to have this outlandish response to the socks, because what this is really about is that I'm really working things through at work as I'm increasing my capacity to handle these new tasks or this new project. So cluing in that that's your default emotion helps you to release it, or to the next step is to even be proactive. So to do things that help to curb that emotion. So for anxiety, it's increasing your peace so that you can manage your emotion as you're increasing your capacity. The next thing that I want to touch on briefly, this is the last piece about this. And this is perhaps the biggest reason to build capacity. When you are building capacity intentionally, it prepares you for having to build capacity when you're not intentionally doing it or wanting to do it. You see, our entire life is filled with situations that are going to put strain on us, where we have two choices. We either build capacity where we are able to navigate, or we have situations like I had yesterday and we fall and we potentially get hurt. So we are not able to rise to the situation or manage or cope. The types of situations that increase our ability to cope or to increase our capacity, whether it's mental or emotional or physical, is any situation that causes that feeling of uncomfort and not used to this and not sure of how I'm going to do this, and results in some type of growth. An example of this could be any physical training. I mean, that's always my go-to, probably because I work out and I train. So it's such an obvious example for me. When you are working out, your capacity for working out increases. So if you're in a situation where all of a sudden you need greater physical capacity, Here's an example. I'm going to tell a story about my husband. Last year on the ski hill, he had a kid that was going through the trail system. And the kid was supposed to wait at the bottom, and the kid didn't wait because he's a kid and he wasn't thinking about it. He was just skiing. So my husband's looking for the kid because he's not skiing in the trail system. He's skiing on the run beside my daughter, who's also skiing. She's not quite ready for the trail system. At this stage, she wasn't. So my husband doesn't know where my son is, who has disappeared. Now, he is now carrying my daughter up the hill in his ski boots. So he's got the ski equipment, and he's hiking up the mountain as he's looking into the trail system to see if my son has fallen. That is not a situation that he could prepare for. He did not necessarily have capacity to do that. He wasn't trying to build up his physical capacity so that he could hike up a mountain in order to look for a kid. But he was in a situation where that is what happened. And he had to respond. So because he was used to building capacity in a physical way, he was able to hike up the hill, and it was difficult and he hated it. And it turns out the kid was not there, but had actually skied down further because he had phoned me and the kid had made it to the bottom of the hill where I was. What I'm trying to communicate to you, and I don't know if I'm doing a good job on it, but things are going to get thrown at us in life. Things where we don't know that we have capacity for it. And we don't have control over those situations that come our way. But when we take time to increase our capacity in areas that we do have control, in areas that we have chosen to increase our capacity, we develop a type of muscle memory. But perhaps it's not muscle, perhaps it's emotional memory or mental memory for knowing what it feels like to build capacity and knowing what it feels like to be successful to build capacity. And that's one of the reasons why figuring out ways to build capacity is so important. When we can do it on our own terms, in situations where it's not our terms, we'll be more likely to be able to stay on the bike and not hit the gravel. This is really what my podcast is all about. It's all about trying to help people become the person that they were meant to be. And I wanted to share this review that someone left me because it really warmed my heart. It really showcased to me that what I'm doing here is helping people. This person, who I don't know who you are, but thank you for this review. It really warms my heart. They said, "This is gold, amazing, full of valuable advice and inspirational words that can be applied to anyone's life. A must listen." Thank you. Thank you for that review. It means the world to me. I'm so thankful that you would take time out of your day to write that to me. It is encouraging to me. I'm in the process of building my own personal capacity. It's been an honor that you would share your time with me, that you would hold space for this. I'm so thankful. Subscribe to my podcast so that you do not miss an episode, whether it's on Apple Podcast, on Spotify, or on YouTube. It really does make a difference to me to hear your reviews and for you to rate my show. It helps me to know that the content that I'm creating is hitting, that it's hitting the mark, and it's helping you become the person that you knew you were meant to be. I'm Amy McInnes. This is The Art of Plenty.